Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by oldschoollane.blogspot.com and is associated with Channel Frederator, Manic Expression, the Comic Book Cast, and the Arun Mehta Show.
I put a spell on you, and now you're gone. Mom, it fell on you, and it was strong. It's strong. Your little lies, I'm up and cross doesn't follow, it's just working. I'm worse. I put a spell on you, and now you're mine. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out. She's lying. If you don't believe, you better get superstitious. Ask my sisters. She's vicious. I put a spell on you, a wicked spell. I put a spell on you, sisters. I say it to buy up or maybe up and die. I say it to buy up or maybe up and die. She's vicious. And I call my Koriyama. Hey, I say bye bye. Bye bye.
Happy Halloween, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Casual Chats. I am Patricia, and I am here with that long-haired creepy guy. Welcome back, creepy.
Thank you. Also, hello everybody.
So, yeah, in honor of the Halloween season, we were talking about which movie should we talk about in honor of the occasion. We had decided between either Hocus Pocus or Nightmare Before Christmas, and we decided that we wanted to talk about Hocus Pocus instead.
Sorry to everyone who was looking forward to hearing about us blather on about Nightmare Before Christmas. Hocus Pocus does have a special place in my heart, though.
Yeah, so maybe we'll talk about Nightmare Before Christmas next year, but yeah, so Hocus Pocus, the 1993 Disney movie that features three witches known as the Sanderson sisters, and it takes place around Salem, Massachusetts. Like
92.
Around that time, like around 1793 or 1693, that's what it was. So it takes place in around 1693, and the Sanderson sisters basically like lure children so that they can be able to suck their youth and become younger. And we focus on one kid known as Thackeray Binks, whose sister was taken away by the sisters and who was sucked through this basically her life was being sucked away. And so
What's your plot point? Death of a child in a Disney film. Fun for the whole family.
Yeah, pretty much so.
One reason, if I get, just to interject, I think that's one reason why people do have a certain fondness for this movie, in that it doesn't pull quite the same punches that you would expect from a Disney family film, in that, there is a sinister side to it. There is a feeling that these aren't your standard bad people in, like movies where they're just so comically inept that they pose no threat. First, right off the bat, first 5 minutes, a child dies rather gruesomely, and another gets horribly transformed into a cat. And it's not like the puff of smoke and you're a cat. This is like, we hear bones snapping and muscle being torn apart and re-knitted back together for him to be in this new shape. So, yeah, horrible things happen early on.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm actually curious, Creepy, how did you first get introduced to this movie?
I saw the previews. Like a lot of people, the previews were on the, were everywhere, at least, on TV for a little while, at least, right up. I don't think the movie got like heavy promotion. It wasn't advertised months in advance or anything like that. But, when it was, like right before it got launched, there was, suddenly a dense circulation of advertisements going for it. And this was back when you saw a lot more previews for movies on television. But I also remember, because, most people, I think, who are listening, they probably know this already, but I was born and raised in the South. My parents were fundamentalists, so they were actually what people call today, they were called premillennial dispensationalists, which is a big, long, fancy name for rapture folk, basically. People who thought that God, Christ was going to come down off of a cloud, at the, at midnight on, at the start of the year 2000 and start the zombie apocalypse or whatever. And so, when word of it got out finally, there was a lot of flack from ministries and religious groups and watchdog groups, and I think the local Christian radio station denounced it for promoting witchcraft and so forth. So there was an element of forbidden fruit quality to it as well. It's making it all the more enjoyable to watch because you're not supposed to be watching this, of course. I was 12, 13 at the time, so that should give you an idea as to why I was watching it. But it is, to me, it is a funny and entertaining movie. It's got Bette Midler in it. What more do you need to say?
Yeah, and it has Bette Midler. It has Sarah Jessica Parker in one of her earlier roles. And
right. I think this was just right before Sex and the City took off. So she was right on the verge of her, her big 90s career, basically. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, you're okay, you're okay. And then there was also, Kathy Najimy, which, she was already becoming a bit of a star in her own right because she was doing the Sister Act movies, and then later on she would voice Peggy Hill in King of the Hill and a whole bunch of other roles.
Right. So she wasn't like she had no fame to her name, but she would go on to have a lot more well-known roles. But yeah, she was all three women in the movie, all three who play the sisters. And let's be honest here, we are watching the movie primarily for the Sanderson sisters.
Yeah, pretty much so. Yeah, and it's interesting, looking back on this movie, Kenny Ortega was who worked on this movie would later work on the High School Musical movies, which I personally have my issues with, but seeing that this guy has been known for amazing choreography with whatever that he's given, I can give the respect for that. And also, if you've seen multiple interviews over the years about how Bette Midler feels about Hocus Pocus, she still calls it to this day her favorite movie that she's ever been a part of.
Yes, she loves this movie. This was not a movie that, she went into it, she had to know going into it, this wasn't going to be a movie that she would win any awards for, but she did it anyway because she wanted to. And apparently, and just hear her go on then and now about how much fun she had on it. She loved the flying scenes, believe it or not. Those were some of her favorite things. In fact, she said in an interview that she wanted to put down on her resume once the movie got out, she wanted to put down acted while flying as one of her as one of the things she's known for now.
Yeah. She could have been known for her singing career, her performance in Beaches, but nope. Put down in her resume, acted while flying.
Yes. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Most celebrities, especially with somebody like Bette Midler, who was huge around the 80s and 90s, that maybe she thought, starring in some kids movie, it's beneath me. But no, she actually had a blast doing it. And you can definitely see whenever she prances around saying her spells and interacting with the other witches. You can tell how much fun she's having.
Right. And all three of them look like they're having a ball. It's not just. Maybe it was that Bette Midler's glee was infectious, but all three actresses playing the Sanderson sisters, just to me, they look like they're having fun. And that really is kind of infectious. Watching this movie, and that people were having a good time on it. That watching it can just sort of get into you and just make you enjoy being along for the ride. And there's of course Billy.
Yeah, Billy. Yeah, and I would think that with let's see, I guess we can start focusing, before we do discuss about Billy and all those other characters. So I guess we need to discuss about like the actual plot, even though that, I mean, I think looking back on it, we can kind of expect it to be like typical 90s fare about like some kid who doesn't feel like he belongs. He came from California and he moves over to Salem, Massachusetts, and he feels like an outcast, and he's being bullied by some of the most generic 90s bullies you would ever see, and such lame names, and just calling him Hollywood and stealing his sneakers. It's just laughable nowadays, the fact that that he finds these guys so threatening.
Yeah. Also, did you get a Bulk and Skull vibe off of those two? And this was like right before Power Rangers got on the air. So, I mean, like, this movie was just a little bit ahead of its time.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. And we even did the Power Rangers podcast about a month ago in honor of his 25th anniversary. So, yeah, I definitely do kind of feel like a Bulk and Skull-esque into, like, the skinny kid and the fat guy. And the fact that they're just trying so hard to be cool and tough, even though they come across as pretty lame. But yeah, I can kind of see that.
Right. But yeah, he's like the new kid and he's awkward and everything. And of course there's the pretty girl from the big important rich family that he pines for. I mean, like, that is one of the things that you got to give the movie a little credit for. They don't explain a lot, but there's a lot of visual cues that you see. Like the standard adult party for adults is at this club. There's a band, and I mean, it doesn't look like it's kind of lame in that all of these adults are trying to act like teenagers again for the because it's like Halloween, so they can let loose a little bit. But at the same time, you go to and I just blanked on her name.
Allison.
Allison, yeah, thank you. You go to her. They go to her house because Max is taking his little sister trick or treating, and they go to Allison's house, and all the adults are done up in like this weird mix of Puritan and Victorian wear or something.
Right before we actually discuss about that, I feel like I should mention this brief little cameo. Otherwise, I'll have to turn in my As Told by Ginger fan card. But Kathleen Freeman, who plays as the teacher that we only see for like 2 minutes, she actually plays as Mrs. Gordon. So there you go. You don't have to bombard me with a million comments about that. I know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, the teacher is actually the one narrating the story about the Sanderson sisters. We find out like afterwards. The Sanderson sisters kidnapped Thackeray Binks's little sister and then transformed him into a cat. But then they were captured and hung. And this is another thing, too. They weren't burned at the stake. They were hung, which was the practice in the New England area at the time. It was not burning at the stake. It was, hanging people. And but the Sanderson sisters have gained kind of like a combination of folklore notoriety and tourist trap legend. Like, they're like, what would happen if the boogeyman became a Disney attraction?
The more that I think about it, I'm just curious about. I was wondering, did Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost kind of take a little bit of influence from this movie?
It's possible because, it doesn't quite follow the same plot, but there are elements, in both movies that kind of ping at the same, at different points, but they're the same ones. There's this New England town, this legend about a witch who was supposedly evil is like there, and they're exploiting that, making money about it now. And, of course, the witch comes back and causes all sorts of trouble. It doesn't follow the exact same formula as Hocus Pocus, but yeah, I can see a comparison between the two. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, they're called tropes for a reason.
Sure. But unlike in Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, the Sanderson house has been shut down for a long time because there's been a lot of spooky things happening. And in reality, it's actually Thackeray who's preventing anybody from reaching over to Winifred's spell book. Who, almost kind of reminds me a little bit of the Necronomicon for some reason.
Right. Well, it does have that creepy spellbook vibe to it, and supposedly it was made. Yeah. And again, going back to the classic Grimm's fairy tale, side of things where it's got a lot more of a sinister edge. The book, is apparently alive, and the pages are made from human skin. Like, the pages and the cover are, made of human skin. And if you look at it, it does look like it's got an eyeball on it that actually opens and looks around. And I think there were bones. It looked like there were like tiny bones or something sewn into it. I did hear a fan theory once that might have been crafted, or at least part of it crafted, from Billy and Winifred's child. Like, Billy, the backstory to Billy the zombie is that when he was alive, he was Winifred's lover, but then he cheated on her with Winifred's youngest sister, and as punishment, she poisoned him and sewed up his mouth, so he could never tell anyone in life or death, what she had done. But, I did hear a fan theory that might have been their child, which just adds a whole other layer of creep factor to it. But yeah, Thackeray was cursed to be a cat, but was also cursed with immortality, so he would always live with the failure of with his failure of having not saved his sister. So he's been kind of skulking around and haunting, so to speak, the Sanderson house to keep anyone from screwing up and bringing the sisters back.
Yeah, and then of course, typical 90s fare of not listening to what is being told, he does in fact bring back the Sanderson sisters, and so they awake, and so they meet up with Danny, who's played by Thora Birch, who a lot of people may know from American Beauty. So then they see her, they want to continue sucking the lives out of children, and then they start, seeing all the other characters, and they believe that Max is a powerful wizard when he gets the lighter and he starts lighting up the fire sprinklers. Yeah, the fire sprinklers, and, sets water, and then they all start freaking out, which I can believe all the times that they would be believing him, because, they've been dead for 300 years, and they don't know about this new technology. But I just find it kind of hilarious that once they start roaming around, they pick things up pretty quickly.
They actually do. And, again, it has that boogeyman kind of effect to it where children are their main target. They are going to steal the youth of children so they can stay young forever. And, one scene that, well, this is skipping ahead, but
sure,
I won't go into it we'll reserve like a more in-depth conversation. In particular, that always stood out in my mind, that was simultaneously beautiful but also very uncomfortable, was the song that Sarah Jessica Parker sings when, near the end of the film, and to her voice is able to kind of lure children out of their homes, and they're sort of sleepwalking, right? But but to rewind and go back a bit, all of the scenes where the Sanderson sisters are trying to get the hang of being in the 90s are just comedy gold.
Yes. I mean, there's so many of them, like trying to get into a bus and, going around and seeing the trick-or-treaters, looking at all the monsters, and we have one of the witches, Mary, who claims to have, has the ability to smell children. So each of the witches have their own abilities. So, Sarah has the ability to sing to lure the children in. Mary has the ability to sniff out children. And Winifred has the ability to read off her spell book. So they each have their own abilities, and, them walking around and seeing all the children trick-or-treating, and they're, like, all confused because there's monsters walking around, and Mary claims that she's lost her power, and Winifred snaps her out of it, and then, of course, we have the cameo of, when the Sanderson sisters go over to the house, we have, we have Penny Marshall, and we have, Gary Marshall, that's what it is. So Gary and Penny Marshall are in this movie.
Yeah. Mistaking Gary Marshall for Satan.
I mean, it's hilarious, So basically, they think that he is Satan, and they And then they just basically like swoon over him, and his wife is just looking like they say that she's like Medusa, with her curlers, thinking that those are like snakes for her hair. And the fact that they're like dancing, and they were like looking around, and like I think Mary had like a remote trying to like change her or something like that. And then they start realizing that Halloween is not like a time of like fearing. It's like a time of children going around and trick-or-treating, and they kind of decide to kind of take advantage of that when they head over to the school. And they basically see they see Max, Allison, and Thackeray trying to basically trying to get the witches not to suck any children's lives right before midnight, otherwise that they not only live forever, but they'll be doing that possibly for all the children around the world. I mean, with the 90s and all, they had, with them flying around in broomsticks, and the possibilities are endless.
Right. Which is pretty terrifying. You don't even really have to think about it all that long. It's just kind of something that'll keep you up at night if you let it. Well, of course, there is that infamous scene while the witches are riding the bus and the children are trying to get away. Something happens to Thackeray the cat. We'll just say that and leave it there. Yay. I mean, he's all right in the end, I guess.
I mean, I know it was established earlier about his immortality, but damn,
They wanted us to know. I mean, they definitely felt that we needed to be absolutely certain that Thackeray the cat was immortal. So, and apparently this was a common thing for him. It was not new that this had happened, given his reaction, both the way he shook it off and his statement of, I hate it when that happens. So this was like a regular occurrence.
Yeah, I mean, who knows how many things that happened to Thackeray over the hundreds of years he's been watching over the Sanderson house.
Right.
So, yeah, basically the whole point of, how the Sanderson sisters got back was if a virgin lit a candle, which a lot of people seem to criticize nowadays.
Yeah, that was... I find it interesting that this was only slightly not okay back in the 90s, and because I can, I remember the 90s it felt like there was some heavy censorship in the 90s, but, I guess because the character was not that old, was only, a couple of years older than his younger sister, so the fact that he was a virgin was more believable, for one thing, and the fact that it's brought up a lot, but it was still not enough to really. I honestly wonder if the movie would have gotten a PG-13 rating when it first came out, if it had been produced by someone other than Disney. It was produced under Touchstone, which was Disney's way of trying to slip things under the radar as far as, getting movies out that wouldn't fit under the actual Disney brand. Yeah. But even then, they still came down pretty hard on themselves as far as censorship went. But I do remember, a lot of people have a problem with that, and I'm just like, he's like, what, 14? He's still riding his bike around, so he's definitely not old enough to drive, and he doesn't have a license or even a learner's permit. So I don't know. I mean, which would be weirder, the fact that he is a virgin or the fact that he isn't?
Yeah. I mean, he does drive a little bit in the movie when they take the car, but I take it that maybe he just try to wing it or something, or maybe he does have a learner's permit and maybe he doesn't have a license, but
it's not 100% clear, but I could believe that. I mean, this is more due to the actor being kind of baby-faced in the first place and not very tall. I actually think Allison is a little bit taller than him, but he he does come across as, he does look very young at the very least. So I would have pegged him at about 14, 15.
Sure, I could see that too.
Virginity at that age, still not shocking.
Yeah, absolutely. So, right. I mean, it's just like you said, creepy. I mean, it would have been even more disturbing if he wasn't a virgin.
Right.
So, that would leave a whole bunch of unanswered questions. So, yeah. Right. Anyway, so, semantics aside about the whole virgin thing. So, basically, they are trying to locate the Sanderson sisters, and they eventually do find the Sanderson sisters in, multiple times. And, then you have the infamous school scene in which you have, Max's parents there. You have the dad dressed as Dracula, and you have the mom dressed as Madonna.
Yeah, that was the thing that happened. Also, just going back a little bit, if you don't mind, I also another reason why I'm not, I'm okay with the whole virgin thing is that they did pull a role reversal with, traditionally in these kinds of circumstances, one of the two girl characters would have been the one to light the candle instead of the guy. But, they, Max is the one who's showing off. He lights the candle, and lo and behold, he's the one who triggers their resurrection. But, mind you, part of this is because the word virgin actually refers to a young, unwed woman in classical terms. It simply refers to a young woman who's not married. The definition of it changed over the years, but I don't mind it as much just because of how they're poking fun at the whole stereotypes. But moving forward, yes, we do have I have to admit, this is my favorite scene in the entire movie. Like this scene made me want to see the movie. Bette Midler as Winifred Sanderson gets up on stage and sings "I Put a Spell on You."
Yes. I think that's everybody's favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah, she's watching the band of skeleton men, I guess, they're singing, and she just has this calculating look on her face, and she's just staring up them like, "Bitch, please." And then, of course, once Max tries to get all the adults to listen, which, we all know in advance that this is not going to work.
Of course not. And I'm just thinking that, again, with the whole luring thing with, the singing, when they're luring the children into their clutches, I take it that the music was like their own way of distracting the adults. It's brilliant, by the way, because they're in a dance party. And they have the ability to sing, and their singing actually kind of numbs them into, basically putting them under a spell, for them to dance all night. And they do dance all night. That's why we don't see any adults roaming around in the streets throughout the third act of the movie.
Exactly. It's also why the kids don't go to adults after that, is because they can't. There's no more adults. They're, at the party, and they can't stop dancing, and there's nothing the kids can think of that will break the spell, so they have to wing it on their own. Also, we'll think about a couple of things, because this actually ties into a lot of occult lore, because it was believed at one time that music was magical. Music had a kind of magic to it. And think about the number of songs, from the 50s on up and even earlier, where audience participation is a thing, where the performer shouts out something and then the crowd echoes it back, which is precisely what the Sanderson sisters are doing during that scene. They get to the part where the actual spell is chanted, and because the audience is none the wiser, they participate in the same chant, and the spell makes, and they didn't have to be aware of what they were doing, they just had to be willing participants in it. And of course, that means the spell affects everybody.
Yeah, and also another thing that I want to bring up, just like you were saying before about how, depending on what kind of music was popular back in either the 40s or the 50s or whatever, and they were considered to be devilish music. Like rock and roll. It was rock and roll music, essentially. And that was, that was considered back then to be like devilish music. That was the kind of music that was forbidden for anybody to listen to.
Mm-hmm. Which, of course, just meant more people listened to it.
Exactly. But yeah, it basically, you know, not only is a fun scene, but it also is a great service to the plot in terms of, you know, why can't they, they're probably going to say like, oh, you know, why can't the kids go to the grown-ups or anything like that? It's like they can't, because they're basically affected by a spell where they can't stop dancing, and they don't even know about it. So
Right.
so yeah, and then of course, then we have of course another brilliant scene in which they decide to trick the Sanderson sisters into the school, and then they lead them over to a boiler room, and then they burn them alive.
Yeah, that's a kiln, actually, I believe it was.
Oh, a kiln, okay.
Yeah, and a kiln is not an ordinary oven. You know, I actually took a couple of art classes while I was in college. A kiln gets incredibly hot, like you know, an oven will get like several hundred degrees, hot in temperature. A kiln can get into the thousands.
Yeah, and that's for clay, right, or glass?
That's for clay. That's for pottery. You mold the pottery into a shape, and then you put it into the kiln, and you essentially blast it with heat, with intense heat, so much that it basically evaporates any moisture that's in it out. And when I was in an art class in college, one of the first things they did was go over basic safety, and they were like, under no circumstances do not touch this kiln. Like, it could have been turned on, so do not touch your bare skin to it, because it will do more than give you blisters. It will incinerate the flesh on your skin. Do not put your hand into the kiln, because it will incinerate the flesh off of your skin. Like, they had horror stories of things like this happening, to people who were unawares or didn't believe it. And, they were not sent to the hospital and bandaged up. They were maimed for the rest of their life. So, yeah, I do believe that three witches were incinerated alive inside of this thing, because those things get unbelievably hot. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's recap, shall we? So we've seen hanging, we've seen a child die, we've seen a cat being run over, and now we see witches burning alive.
Yeah. Not to mention, we saw a human being, heard a teenage male have his entire body break down and restructured. Just the audio is kind of disturbing. Virginity and all the references to it. Madonna bra combs, can't forget that. I was like, lady, dial it back. You're going to put someone's eye out with that. It's probably going to be one of your children. Yeah. And now three simultaneous cases of human immolation.
And all done in the name of Disney.
Yeah. Oh, and necromancy.
Oh, Billy. Can't forget about that too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and Satanism, the earlier scene with the witches and them, when he's outside laughing, wah ha ha ha, master. So references to Satanism. This is. Oh man, and again, I feel like this part of this movie's endearing quality, the reason why it has lasted, is because it took as many risks as it did. Is because it wasn't quite as safe as some other, as it could have been. It's there is there's this fun, and there's this insane comedy and hilarity, but there's also a lot of danger to it too. And there's an internet reviewer named Rantasmo who did a very quick review of Hocus Pocus, and he described Hocus Pocus as encompassing everything good about Halloween. The trick-or-treating, costumes, fantasy, adventure, staying out late, getting jacked up on sugar, magic, but also a serious element of danger.
Yeah. And also, it's all done in a time limit because they have to keep the Sanderson sisters at bay and not let them suck the lives out of children before the sun rises.
Right. And that's actually a plot point. They have to, it's basically a race to keep the book out of the Sanderson sisters' hands before the sun rises, because if they can do that, that's only as long as the Sanderson sisters have. And I do like that they show the kids doing more than just, running for their lives and trying to hide. Allison is the one who has the idea to, there's an old oven that they're in an alley that they're hiding behind, and it gives her the idea to, hearkening back to Hansel and Gretel, to trick them into going into the kiln and, setting them on fire. And that's, it shows, again, another thing to like about it is Allison is shown to be very smart, and it's not an informed ability. It's, she has a good idea, this was probably the smartest idea that they had, instead of just running and trying to hide, which they've, it's been shown that they can't keep doing this because the witches are able to track them and they've got a killer zombie on their hands. So they've got to take the initiative and do something themselves instead of just hiding. And again, this is good writing. This is clever writing, and I applaud that. I wish we need more of that. So we need more Hocus Pocus, more movies to the standard of Hocus Pocus, believe it or not.
I'm actually going to ask you, Creepy, and I know that usually I would save this for the end, but have you read the book?
Believe it or not, no, and I'm a little bit sad about that. It's it's one of those things that was on my to-do list, and I unfortunately just sort of, it got moved back, basically.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know I have not read the book either. So, believe it or not, for those who are interested, there is a continuation of Hocus Pocus in book form. Mm-hmm. And I think you can find it on, what was it, Target or Walmart or something?
Something, one of the two. I would assume that it would be available on Amazon.com by now. But,
yeah, probably.
Right. Regardless, I do want to read the book one day. It would be something that I imagine that I would enjoy. So there's that.
Yeah, and I'm looking at a synopsis of it right now if you're interested in me reading it to you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is called Hocus Pocus and the All-New Sequel. What a clever name. So basically, it briefly discusses about how, Max Dennison with Allison, and they stop the Sanderson sisters, blah, 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 blah. So it says right here, 25 years later, Max and Allison's 17-year-old daughter Poppy finds herself face-to-face with the Sanderson sisters in all their sinister glory. When Halloween celebrations don't quite go as planned, it's a race against time as Poppy and her friends fight to save her family and all of Salem from the witch's latest vile scheme. And it shows about Poppy and about how she's a skeptic of all things supernatural, and she musters the courage to share her family's backstory with her friend and crush who it's a woman. She actually has a crush on a girl. Good on ya.
Awesome. Yeah.
So yeah, look at this. Her new friend and crush, Isabella Richards. So good for you.
Yay!
Okay, so we have her other friend is Travis Reese, who is a math and chemistry whiz and a master of bad puns, and Poppy's loyal BFF. He's the only one who knew about Poppy's bizarre family history involving the Sanderson sisters. So he's essentially the Allison of the book,
awesome.
Which he knows about it. And then there's Isabella. She seems to have the perfect life. She's the most popular girl and has a killer report card. It's no wonder Poppy thinks no one can hold a candle to her. See what we did there. Ha ha. After Isabella befriends Poppy and Travis at the start of the school year, Poppy shares her family's connection to the Sanderson sisters. Oh, okay. Will Halloween night find Poppy, Isabella, and Travis digging for the truth? Check in for this 2-in-1 adult novel that includes the refresh of the original story plus the all-new sequel in which they learn about the origin of the resting witch face and have an epic witch venture. Ooh, this actually sounds really cool. I actually want to read this now.
Yeah, I do too now. Also, one point that I will make also in the movie's favor is I do like how the movie ends. Is that it may come across as a little schmaltzy, but yeah, I do like the way that the resolution is. Not just, the last couple of minutes, but also, after they realize that, they've only got so much time before sunrise, and they may not make it that long, they decide to use everything that they've learned so far to make a final stand. And Billy joins their side. I love that. Billy is like, I'd rather hang out with you guys. Considering what happened with him and Winifred, I can believe that he would switch over and side with the kids.
Yeah, sure. And, we have basically, they're 2 out of the 3 brooms are taken away earlier in the movie. All of the brooms are actually taken away earlier in the movie by little girls who are dressed up as the Sanderson sisters, which is adorable. And so they have to use, other things. So Winifred actually uses another broom. Sarah uses a mop, and Mary uses a vacuum cleaner.
Yes. And of course, Max being Max, he has to open the book, even though he was told multiple times, don't do that. It's like Max's thing in this movie seems to be do the opposite of what people tell me to do.
Yes, and so basically they decide to open the book, and they read through it thinking that, the Sanderson sisters are dead. They've been burned into the kiln. There's no danger whatsoever. And so they look through it, they see a whole bunch of spells, trying to find a way so they can turn Thackeray back into a human. And, they learn, little bits, for example, that's when Allison learns about how salt, gets rid of witches. And, then, she actually uses that in some parts of the movie to, distract them and to lure them away. And
right. She actually says, even before the opening the book is what lets the Sanders, after the kiln scene, they are revived yet again, because the terms of the curse are that they can't die until sunrise. They either get the book back, which has the life-sucking potion, so that and drain children of their life energy so they can stay young forever, or sunrises and they're dead. But between then and sunrise, they've got a pretty much get out of death free card. But which is why it's so important for the kids to stay away. But Allison, even before the Sanderson sisters find them after they open the book, is she's like, she specifically says that she's going to take some salt out of Max's kitchen and take it home with her, because she'll feel a lot safer walking home, Halloween night, after everything that's happened. And again, this is like, Allison is the smart one of the group. She has several good ideas. She's like, after the night that we've had, I'm going to get something that I learned, from a reliable source will protect me from a witch's magic. So, and she uses that, and it works. So, she's the smart one.
Yeah, and also, when they capture Danny and they, the Sanderson sisters get the book and they start making the potion. Danny basically insults the Sanderson sisters that they're ugly and that no matter how many souls that they'll intake, that they'll always be ugly. And so Winnie basically just has that look saying that she's gonna die first. And
so it's just like, oh yeah.
Yeah. So then we have the rescue plot, in which Allison and Max come by and they save the day and they spill most of the potion except for enough for one child. And even though that Winifred, and we've seen throughout the movie that she can be pretty stubborn, and she's the leader amongst the other witches, that even though that they have the bullies and they have all the other children coming by, they could have taken one of them and sucked at least one of the children, and they would have prevented death pretty much forever. But no, Winifred is so much in revenge mode, that she wants to kill Danny, and she's going to save that specific potion to kill her.
Right, well, that does fit, like, I'm okay with, normally this would be the point where you just, like, grab your hair and just want to scream, but that is, again, that's clever writing, because throughout the movie, we see that Winifred is the smartest one of the three sisters, but at the same time, she's also just as susceptible to her emotions as they are. Like, throughout it, we'll see her insult Sarah for being the hoe, and Mary for being the dumb, hungry one. But, and we do see that her younger sisters are basically led around by their id. They pretty much just go wherever their emotions lead them. But Winifred isn't really immune to that. She's not the exception to the rule either. She's definitely the one who has a little bit more of a leash on her emotions, but that leash slips out of her hands multiple times. It doesn't take a lot for Winifred to lose control and to just go off the deep end, as we'll see. We see throughout the film that, yes, she's just as much led around by her emotions as her sisters are. So this isn't like the third act where the villain does something stupid. This is consistent writing with the rest of the movie, like Winifred, this is a problem that Winifred is shown to have consistently throughout the film. So when she does it here, and especially because Danny hit such a sore spot for her, I think if Danny had not actually called her ugly, it may not have hit her quite so hard. But this is shown to be a big, big berserk button for Winifred. So when Danny says, and that's a pretty awesome moment for Danny, because she knows, as far as she knows, she knows she's going to die. At least in that moment, she believes she is. And she's like, I am not going to cry. I am not going to be scared. I am going to stare these bitches in the face, and I'm going to tell them what I think of them. And that is an awesome moment. But I think also that is what sent Winifred off the deep end. It's like the one thing, that she hates more than anything else is being called ugly. So, yeah, it's still believable. It's still in character for Winifred to just, snap and go on this roaring rampage of revenge where she's like, no, I want that little bitch. I want the one who called me ugly. She dies first.
Yeah, and again, it's consistent with the movie because Thackeray Binks did the exact same thing in the beginning of the movie. Because he was the one who called them ugly, and that no matter how many children, they would not be beautiful. And so that's when they decided, okay, we're going to turn him into a cat. So again, this follows in continuity.
Yeah, and it may seem strange that we're both praising the writing in this movie, but there's a reason for that. I mean, look at the number of children movies whose demographic, whose target audience are young people, and look at the quality of writing in them. So many times, because it's aimed at children, it's like, well, this is aimed for kids, so it doesn't have to make sense, or it doesn't have to be good, or who cares if the plot doesn't add up or anything, it's aimed at children, so it doesn't matter. But the fact that this movie cared enough to put this kind of effort into it, especially a movie that is as goofy and insane as Hocus Pocus, the fact that they wanted the writing to be smart. They wanted the writing to be consistent and clever, and for the characters to be consistent, and for there to be a growth arc, and just all the things that make up good writing. They genuinely did put as much of this as they could into the movie. That means something.
Yeah, that does. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's another reason why this movie is held in such high regard. That matters. They cared. Somebody gave a damn. And, just like, there's this part of me that just like wants to throw my hands up and say, finally, so at least someone did, and that's why I say we need more movies like Hocus Pocus. It's, the movie is funny and hammy and just over the top. But at the same time, it treats young people with a level of respect, ironically. There's probably a good deal of irony in that, but it still treated its target audience like they should have smart writing, and that they are intelligent enough to be able to follow smart writing.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. So, I guess we can start wrapping things up. So basically, at the end of the movie, they were able to defeat the Sanderson sisters in time, and the sun comes up, they turn into dust, and then unfortunately Thackeray Binks also dies as well. But his soul is free, and he can be able to go with his sister. Mm-hmm. And then it pretty much just ends on a very happy note, which, with everything that's been going on, it does make a lot of sense that it would end in that kind of way. And and according to the book, they do come back, even though I have no idea how, but apparently they do.
Yeah, it's like, I imagine, for Max, Danny, and Allison, like, after it was all over with, I imagine there was a good bit of just, we're alive! We're covered in our own shit, but we're alive!
and I guess it does kind of make sense that maybe they would come back, because if you remember from that final scene in the movie where the bullies are just still stuck in the house in cages singing row, row, row your boat, the eye of the book's eye starts to open. So it could be that maybe they could come back.
Yeah, and I will always remember Thackeray's parting words. When he's reunited with his sister, they see he lays eyes on her for the first time in 300 years, and she's like, "What took you so long?" "Well, it wasn't my fault. I had to wait 300 years for a virgin to light a candle."
Which actually, that kind of makes me question about, like, if he was keeping people away from the house for so long, do you think that maybe it could have happened sooner?
Possibly. No, but I mean, at the same time, this was, any time before Home Alone, would mean that you would come across a group of kids who probably were not capable of dealing with three inept yet homicidal witches.
That's true. I guess you're right. You have a point
there.
So basically this movie, it did get, like, kind of mixed reviews when it first came out, but more and more people seemed to appreciate it over time. In fact, a few years ago, the Sanderson sisters, started, performing in Disney World and Disneyland, and then the movie started being re-released in theaters, and then, of course, there's the book that we just mentioned a while back. So yeah, this movie, and of course there's the constant reruns that's recently on Freeform. So yeah, this movie is starting to kind of like gain a bigger following than it did 25 years ago.
Agreed. And if you notice, a lot of cult movies, movies that have this kind of following to them, had that reaction from critics when they first came out. Think about Rocky Horror, or, like Hocus Pocus, or just name any kind of movie that has cult status. Chances are reviews for it were anywhere from negative to mixed. And then thanks to things like reruns on cable or on HBO and the other movie networks, or I remember this movie got rerun a lot during the holidays, during the Halloween month, during the month of October on the Disney Channel, after after it had been a couple of years. So things like that, put it into circulation, and VHS rentals, really kept this movie in the public consciousness, I think.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me a little bit of Pushing Up Rose's video when she was discussing about the movie Clue, based off of the board game, in which critics didn't like the movie. And then when there were reruns on TV, people started to like it. And then the same thing happened with It's a Wonderful Life. It got mixed reviews when it first came out, and then it became a holiday staple. So did A Christmas Story, same thing.
Right, so there's plenty of movies that have that start off with that kind of reputation, but as time goes on, public opinion towards it softens, and it becomes kind of a this really was a good movie. I wish people had seen that in the beginning. And I love Clue. I'll be honest with you, I think Clue is hilarious.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I even still to this day, every time that somebody rambles on and on and on, and then they say long story short, I always say too late.
Yeah, too late. I hated her so much. I did flames on the side of my face, heaving, breathing breaths.
Yeah, and then of course there's this scene about you shot 1 in the ceiling, 2 in the floor, 2 more right here, 2 more right there, so it's 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1. No, it's 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1. No, it's 1 plus 1 plus... Shut up! Okay, I'm done. So, yeah, I've actually read some articles, and I've read some news reports over the years about Hocus Pocus and all the interviews about the movie, and talks about that this was supposed to be a lot more darker, and they had some difficulties with the story structure, and then they decided to lighten it up in tone, and then there was talks that there was a lot of mixed opinions from people saying that it's okay, it's not going to be like a staple in Halloween movies or in comedy, and it's just silly fodder for kids. So I think that with that it's definitely changed since then, and I'm not even joking when I say this, that as of the making of this podcast, pretty much I've seen people announcing that they're going to do a retrospective or a podcast on Hocus Pocus. So Jaime Tuden Morgan is working on one, and Zenith is working on one for Disney Debate. So yeah, people are still talking about this movie fondly.
Mm-hmm. I do think that they hit a good balance though with the movie between the comedy and the horror aspects. So and I am one of those people who feels like fear is a part of the emotional spectrum, and I don't necessarily think that shielding children from things that are scary is necessarily healthy or even right. Folktales have survived for a reason, and it's like with Broadway shows like Into the Woods, that took. Was made during the 80s and took a lot of the fairy tales that had been boulderdized back to their roots of being much darker and having much more of an edge to it. And Hocus Pocus does feel like a fairy tale.
Yeah, it feels more like a contemporary fairy tale.
Yes, it does. There is a morality to it, but it's not. You can get the moral, and you don't feel like you've been bludgeoned with it. It doesn't try so hard to get its point across that it doesn't have fun. And some things are best left alone. You shouldn't monkey around with things without understanding what you're doing. Family is important, and if you are older, you do have a responsibility to your younger siblings, even if they can be kind of annoying, or even if sometimes you have to be willing to give up things that you want for someone else. And there are good points that this movie makes, and those are good things, and it manages to do that without getting tedious or repetitive.
Yeah. And I guess one more thing to add in right before we concluded is that there's been a rumor going on for a while that there might be another Hocus Pocus movie coming to the Disney Channel, but nothing has yet to be confirmed. And if that's the case, I'm actually curious about if they're going to base it off of the book, or if they're actually going to follow it with the movie. I'm not sure. And if that's the case, then I don't know. Are they going to bring newer people to the movie? Are they going to try to bring Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy and Jimmy back? I'm actually curious about what's if it's ever going to happen, and what's it going to be about. So
I wouldn't necessarily be against that.
Okay, I think that do you have any final words to say about this right before we go?
I feel like I've said pretty much all I can say. I love this movie. It's awesome. And honestly, yeah, it's a perfect movie for Halloween, but I would watch this movie any time of the year.
Yeah. And, yeah, I would say the same thing here, that, if you're not into horror movies, like, scary movies around this time of year that everybody would be talking about, like, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, or anything like that. And if you're into more horror comedies, then yeah, I would recommend that you guys check this out.
Definitely. Thank you for having me, Patricia.
Can you repeat that again?
Thank you for having me, Patricia.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming by. Please, plug and promote your stuff.
Check out my channel, That Long-Haired Creepy Guy, and also my other channel, Midnight Wing Theater, where I review movies of very, very, very questionable quality.
Yeah. All right, then. So, thank you so much for listening, everybody. Let us know in the comments below about your earliest memories of Hocus Pocus. Who are your favorite characters? What is your favorite moment? What's your favorite song? And have you guys even read the Hocus Pocus sequel book? Or if you would like to see a Hocus Pocus TV movie in Disney Channel, what would you like to see it based on? Would you like it to be a complete reboot or a continuation? And as of the making of this podcast, I've already released my top 10 worst episodes of As Told by Ginger. Part 2 will be coming out relatively soon. And also, coming up will be the newest episode of Dream Machine, where we're going to skip out a little bit down on the DreamWorks timeline, and we're going to be discussing about monsters versus aliens. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So lots of things to come. Hope to see you around soon. Happy Halloween, and take care.
Good night, everybody.
Come, little children, I'll take thee away into a land of enchantment. Come, little children, the time's come to play here in my garden of shadows. Follow, sweet children, I'll show thee the way through all the pain and the sorrows. Weep not, poor children, for life is this way, murdering beauty and passion.